And let me switch to my iPad over here. And we're going to talk about two kinds of sorting solutions, sorting algorithms. And the first one is called selection sort. Literally speaking, the algorithm basically just keeps selecting. That's why it's called selection sort. And the other one, let me just look ahead very quickly, is called insertion sort, which means the algorithm primarily is trying to keep inserting into the array somehow, right? And this part, I just want to talk about visually how the two sorting algorithms actually work. Just make sure intuitively you can distinguish them. You can distinguish between them. I don't think they're really similar, but sometimes beginners may actually just get confused about what is really the difference between selection sort versus insertion sort. They are very different. Okay, let's now take a look. For selection sort, the principle is we want to keep selecting the minimum from the unsorted portion of the array, and then append to it the end of the sorted portion. Okay, basically there will be two portions in the input array. We can think about somehow the input array eventually will become the output array, since we are trying to modify the input array directly, and there will be two portions. One will be unsorted. So you can think about initially, since the input is completely unsorted, so I'm going to use the red to actually to denote the unsorted portion. In the beginning, conceptually, the input array is completely unsorted, so the entire array is unsorted. Is the unsorted portion, and the green one is going to be sorted portion. In the beginning, is simply just empty. Nothing has been sorted just yet. All right. Eventually, we'll hopefully to transform this array to be an array that's all green, meaning that the entire array is the entire sorted portion. Eventually, okay. The similar principle will apply to the insertion sort. Let's now go over visually very quickly, and then we can even on this visual sketch or design, we can already see what the running time is already. Okay, let's talk about this array over here. We got 3, 1, 4, 2, and let's follow the principle here. We gotta keep selecting the minimum from the unsorted portion. How large is the unsorted portion over here in the beginning? Well, the entire array, right? In that case, we're gonna choose the minimum, and I'm also going to need copies of the array of the same size. Okay, and let's now see step number 1. After performing step number 1, first of all, we're gonna choose the minimum elements from the array, which will be 1 over here, and we're gonna insert it into the end of the sorted portion. And the assumption is the sorted portion will actually go from left to right. That's the assumption, which I didn't put over here. So that'll be from the left to right of the array. So we're going to put 1 over here. Everything else is going to be is going to remain the same, which means we still got 3, 4, and 2 over here being unsorted. All right, so far so good. Okay, let's see. So this part would be the sorted, the unsorted portion, and this part here is the sorted portion, right? After every step, because we're gonna use a loop to really implement both selection sort and insertion sort. After every iteration, you can expect the sorted portion to grow larger, strictly larger, and the unsorted portion is gonna shrink, strictly. It's gonna become strictly smaller. That's the idea. All right, let's keep going. After the second, we just did the first step, right? Step number 1 to step number 2. And let's now do the second step, second iteration. After that, of course, in order to do that, we have to choose the minimum from the unsorted portion. So how large is the unsorted portion? In this case, it will be 1 smaller from the previous iteration, right? So it's going to be choosing the minimum from here, which will be 2. All right, let me put it down. So it's going to be 2 over here, and then we're going to insert it to the appended to the end of the sorted portion. So 1 here doesn't change, and then append 2 to its end, right? Effectively, this portion over here, which is strictly larger than the previous one, has now become the sorted portion, and then the rest will just be the unsorted portion. In that case, it will be 3 and 4, right? 3 and 4 over here, okay, and then that'll be the unsorted portion. Okay. Well, in this case, even though the unsorted portion just happened to be sorted already, but we're still going to follow through the different steps, because in general, the unsorted portion might just remain unsorted until it becomes empty, right? Okay, let's do another step over here, and another one. Let me just put another instance of the array over here. And then, so this one, we're going to do another step over here. So choose the minimum. The minimum is going to be chosen from the unsorted portion over here, which is going to be 3. Okay, so we're going to append it conceptually to the end of the sorted portion. So after appending, we effectively got a sorted portion that's strictly larger. So now we got actually 1, 2, 3 over here, and also we got 4 as the unsorted. Okay, over here, and then that's it. That's it. Okay, and you can what you can definitely think about. We can just do one more step to actually make sure we actually grow this particular sorted portion to cover the entire array. But in practice, we don't really need to, because up to this point, the unsorted portion only got 1 element. A 1 element array, for example, is automatically sorted because there's no neighboring element to compare against, so it's automatically sorted in any order that you desire. Okay, so now we're basically done. Okay, and so up to this point here, we just keep selecting the minimum and then append it to the sorted portion, right? Now, I think well, conceptually you pretty much know how it works, but now let's talk about the running time. We can talk about it already. Okay, let me make it more general over here. The selection part is the more expensive one. The selection part, selecting the minimum over here, and you know how to really write a loop to really calculate the minimum, to really compute the minimum of an array. So this is more expensive. And then when you try to append it to the end of the sorted portion, this part over here will be cheaper because you don't really need to know where to append. Just append to the end, right? So this will be cheaper. All right. Let's think about the running time. In general, if the array is of size n, in that case, what will be the running time to really choose the minimum from an array of size n? Well, it should be just n, right? So it would be n in the first step. Okay, you know what? Let me put it here. It would be n in the first step, and then to really append to the end of the to really append maybe 1 to the end of the sorted portion, initially simply empty. That one would just be like a constant time operation, right? That's something we also see in the loop in the actual code, right? You can think about this is going to be n plus 1. All right, and the plus 1, you can think about the n over here is about selection, and the 1 over here is really about append. It's going to be very similar for every iteration. Let's see the second iteration. And for the second iteration, we go from here to here. And how large is the unsorted portion? Well, since we got n, so now we should get really n minus we should get n minus 1. So it's going to be n minus 1 and then plus 1. Again, this will be selecting the minimum, and this part over here will be about appending to the sorted portion, and then we keep going until we get to the very last iteration. In this case, to really choose if you really want to choose the minimum from the unsorted portion, in that case it would be simply just 1, right? And then append to the end of the sorted portion will just be 1. That'll be the pattern. So it's going to be select, and also it's going to be append. Right, so now we can actually write down the formula about how what it would be like. So it is going to be something like that. Big O of, okay. So we can split them into 2 parts. How many appending do we need, right? You can think about for whenever we want to grow the size of the sorted portion by 1, we have to do 1 appending to its end, right? And eventually we want to cover the entire array conceptually for the sorted portion. So that will be just n, right? Depending on the size of the array. So this will be append to the end of the sorted portion. For each iteration, it would just be 1, but we need to grow the sorted portion from 0 until the size of n, for the array. okay, of sorted portion. That part is easy. And then plus, what about the selecting part? Selecting part, the initial selection is the most expensive one. It's going to be n plus 1. And then, now that, and this will be the first selection. The first selection. And then what about the second selection? For the second selection, because the unsorted part has shrunk for one element less, in that case, it's going to be n, right? So this will be second selection. The selection is going to get cheaper and cheaper because the unsorted portion is going to grow smaller and smaller. That's why. Okay, selection, and all the way to eventually the unsorted portion will just be of size 1, just plus 1 over here, right? And you should know very well this particular sequence over here that we spoke about earlier. That's the arithmetic sequence, and we know that it's simply the highest power would just be n squared, right? You know the formula, you can refer to it. And we got something about n squared, and also we got n. What is the highest power? What? N squared. So the running time, even from the design stage, like a visual sketch of the algorithm, we can know is actually big O of n squared. It's a quadratic sorting algorithm. In some ways, not too bad, as long as the input size is not too large, right? But the concept is actually very straightforward. You don't need any recursion. Let's put it that way. But later on, when we get to the more efficient algorithm, like a better than n squared, for example, n log n, we will need recursion to help us. All right, that's about selection sort. And let's now try to follow a similar manner to give you some visual intuition about insertion sort. And the insertion sort will kind of work in a symmetric way, like a different way, like opposite way. And let's look at the conceptual principle over here. Okay, conceptual principle is going to be, we want to keep getting the first element from the unsorted portion. You can see getting the first or appending to the last. We have no choice. We just gotta put in a particular place. So that'll be almost like an array indexing operation. So this will be the cheaper one. On the other hand, after you get that particular element from the unsorted portion, you're going to insert it to the sorted portion so that the sorted portion remains to be sorted. So that means you cannot just insert to the end of the sorted portion like selection sort. In that case, you might just break the pattern for the for like a non-descending pattern for your sorted portion. This will be more expensive, right? This is only about some informal guidance for how the insertion sort works. I'll show you exactly. Okay, more expensive. Let's see. All right. Let's say we got some insertion sort. Let's say in the beginning, we can we can definitely be a little bit more efficient here. We can say in the beginning, the first elements of the array actually will constitute the sorted portion. 3 itself is already sorted. On the other hand, the rest of the array is simply unsorted. Okay, what we're gonna do is we're gonna see the unsorted portion, simply keep choosing the first element. For example, this one here, try to insert it into the sorted portion in the right place. For example, we cannot simply insert 1 after 3, like in the selection sort. In that case, we get 3, 1, which is not non-descending. All right. Let's now try to see how the first step is going to proceed for insertion sort. Okay. The first step over here, we are simply just going to choose the first element, right? You can see the first element from the unsorted portion, which will be this one. It's not like a calculating the minimum, right? It's much cheaper than calculating minimum. So it's more like a constant time operation. Just make a note. Choosing the leftmost one. As long as you can keep track of the indices of where that leftmost element is in the unsorted portion, it's a constant time operation. Right, and then we're gonna insert it into the right spot. In that case, 1 should really come before 3, right? In that case, we're going to have the sorted portion grown by 1 elements, and then the unsorted portion will shrink by 1 element. In that case, we're gonna get 2 and 4 left, right? So we got 4 and 2. Still, it is still unsorted, right? And the next step, we're going to follow a similar principle over here. Let me now just get another array over here. Let's say over here. Okay. And we still got to choose the first element. Okay, this is 4. Just make it a little bit darker over here. And how do we choose the element? Well, choose just the first one from the unsorted portion. It's a constant time operation. And then how do we insert 4 into the right spot into the sorted portion so that it remains sorted? In this case, it happens to be at the end because 4 is larger than or equal to this one already, right? So that will be 1, 3, and 4. How exactly such logic should work, you will see the actual code in a moment. All right, so the sorted portion grows by 1, and the unsorted portion now shrink by 1. So that means we only got 2 left. Right? And we are not done yet. Not yet. Okay? You can see here, in the case of the selection sort, when we only got 1 left, we can declare that we are done because 4 will be conceptually appended to the end of the sorted portion anyway. But now in this case, if we simply say we are done, we are actually not done because 2 cannot just be appended to the end in this case, right? 2 somehow has to be inserted somewhere over here. So we're going to perform one more step. All right. So let me just move this a little bit upwards over here. Okay. Let me just do one more array. All right. So that one there is going to be another step over here. So how should the 2 be inserted? So you can see we want to make sure we keep looking at the indices to make sure as soon as we find out there is an element that's actually less than or equal to 2. In that case, that means that's where we can insert. 4 is not less than or equal to 2. So we're going to go to the next one. 3 is not less than or equal to 2. So we're going to go to the next one. And 1 is actually less than or equal to 2. So if we insert it over here, it's guaranteed 2 is going to sit in between these 2 numbers. All right. All right. So let's now put it. So now it's going to be 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right? It's being inserted exactly over here. And then it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. I would say this kind of visual sketch might be the way you would design your algorithm if that algorithm is not actually already available. That's something that you want to know how to do creatively, right? Of course, this is just one example. Let's now talk about the running time very quickly, right? If you think about for the selection sort, you can see the very first iteration is the most expensive one because we're going to choose the minimum from the almost unsorted array, right? On the other hand, for insertion sort, the first iteration is actually the cheapest one because the array where we have the unsorted so the sorted portion where we have to insert a new element is the smallest, and this last iteration would be the second one. This last iteration would be the most expensive one because in order for us to really insert this into it, we actually have to keep looking to see where the correct spot is. In that case, it can take up to almost the entire array, which would be linear, right? That's how I can see it. Hopefully you can see that as well. Let's talk about the running time over here. So you can see from here to here, the first step, about it's going to be just 1 plus 1. Okay, so the 1 over here is just about what I should really let me say getting, right? It's getting the first element from the unsorted portion. Getting this one over here is just constant get. And then for insert, you can see the sorted portion is only of size 1. So it takes only maximum 1 iteration to find out exactly where you should really insert the element. So that will be about insert. All right. And then what about second iteration? The get will still be just constant time, just getting the leftmost element. So that'll be 1, so which will be to get, and plus. And now you can see to really insert into this particular grown sorted area is now will take up to 2 iterations to find out where to insert. So that'll be 2. And we keep going until the very last iteration over here, that in which case we are going to insert this one here into the rest, right? In that case, getting it will still be constant time operation. But how large is this particular sorted portion? It could be maybe about n-1, right? Approximately. It should be n-1 in order for us to insert. Because it can take you approximately up to n-1 iterations to actually find the right spot to insert. All right, let's now write down the big O calculation. big O of, and again we got 1, 2 all the way to here. So we're gonna again every time we want to get the 1 to really grow the size of the sorted portion by 1. Eventually we want to cover the entire array, which will be size n. So I'll just put n over here. Ultimately that will be to really get the first elements of the unsorted portion, because the unsorted portion keep changing between iteration to iteration. And then plus, and now let's take a look at the insertion. It's going to be something like this. The first iteration, it will take 1, and then 2 all the way to n minus 1. It's also an arithmetic sequence, as you can see, right? It's going to be 1 plus 2 plus all the way to n minus 1. You can see it will turn out to be equally efficient as the selection sort. You can see for the selection sort, the first selection is the most expensive one. On the other hand, if you look at the insertion sort, so this will be the first insert, and this will be the second insert, and etc. So the last insert, it will be the most expensive one. Right? You can see this is the last insert. That's the most expensive one. And we know very well this is also an arithmetic sequence whose sum will be n squared, approximately. And then so n squared compared with n, we got n squared as the highest power. So that will also be big O of n squared. So it turns out selection sort and insertion sort, they work quite differently, but of course you can see that they share some similarity, but it turns out they are equally efficient asymptotically. Right? We haven't seen any code. I'm only trying to describe the algorithm to you. So that's some technique I wish you can also try to develop on your own to make sure without showing the code to somebody else. You might just be able to describe how the algorithm works by using some diagram or some input sketch. Alright, so that's about what I want to say about these two algorithms. We already know about their running time, but only informally. We haven't seen the concrete code just yet, but we'll do that in the next video.